Welcome to another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric. I am coming to you from my backyard on my back porch this Saturday afternoon, the first day of Tour de Fleece. And I am not sure how much my microphone is picking up the sounds behind me. If you can hear the birds, you can probably hear the background noise of the people mowing, the cars going by, and maybe even an airplane or two going over. But we'll see. Maybe the microphone won't pick up all of that. I can't believe it's been a year since I started making these videos. Videos that I did a lot here in the backyard. Videos that did not have me speaking to the camera. And videos that were much shorter than some of the ones that I've made since. It has been a journey. A year ago when I started Tour de Fleece, I thought it would be wonderful to try recording a little bit of spinning. Since I have a number of friends who had never seen someone spin, I thought it would be nice to put it out there for my friends and my family. And over the year, I have realized there's a lot of things worthwhile sharing and recording. I thank you if you have been along this journey with me. If you're new to this journey with me, welcome. I hope that you will get something valuable from your time watching me today. It is Tour de Fleece again, the first day, and I have fiber ready. And so today, hoping not to have a whole lot of crinkling noise in the microphone, I'm going to try to show you the fibers that I've chosen to spin this year. I have a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I'm doing. So I'm a little bit busier than I've been in the past. I may not get as much, actually I know I won't get as much spinning done. So I decided to do something a little different. Rather than diving into all of my wonderful fibers, rather than dyeing up some new fibers, playing with lots of color, I'm going to go completely natural, completely unprocessed, other than the fibers that I'll be spinning will have been cleaned. I may have to do a little carding to open up the Angora because once it's been washed it does get a little compacted, but I'm going to try to limit any use of processing tools and keep this wild and free and really simple. That's the goal. So yesterday in preparation I went out and you can actually see the storage behind me. Storage unit behind me. I went out and I started to gather up my fibers, and I thought, oh, I'll just get a few days worth. But I was having so much fun, I ended up gathering up all 21 spinning days of fiber. I think I will be taking some rest days, but we'll see. So, let's talk about the fiber. I actually kind of forgot some of the fibers that I had. And I will take photos of each of the fibers and match them up so that you can see probably right here over the basket. But this first fiber that I've pulled out, it is fin sheep. Let me pull this up. Sorry about the sound of the crunching bag. This is fin sheep. And I have spun, let me put it in a bowl. I have spun a tiny bit of this once before. It is very lustrous once it's spun. It is a nice size lock. A little bit coarse, but I have some other coarse fibers, and I think it would look really well with some of those. So that is the first fleece. That is the first wool that I'm pulling out today, first bag. We'll put it over here out of the way. It is, oh, gotta make sure I put my tag in it, fin sheep. So let's see what else we're going to do. Oh, I already know this one just on sight. This one is Jacob. So when I went and I pulled fiber, I had already done a test earlier in my earlier video. I determined that I needed to keep my spin around an ounce a day if I was going to get anything else done. And I do have some other projects I have to be working on. In fact, I'll show you one of those actually right now. We'll cut to that just now. One of the projects I'm working on is, those of you who followed the Tour de France know that there's the yellow jersey. And those of you that have followed Tour de Fleece know that there are days that we should wear our yellow jerseys. Well, I don't have a yellow jersey. So instead, I'm making myself, I'm making myself a yellow vest. It has it's been prepared for, there's a steek here, so I'll be able to cut it open. There's steeks here on the arm for the armholes, and it's going from, my unusual, it's going from bottom up rather than top down. And as soon as I start running out of fiber, I'm going to finish it off, and it will just be a simple vest. So that is the other thing, one of the other things that I'm working on. I'm close to having it finished, so hopefully in one of the upcoming videos, I will be wearing my yellow jersey. But back to the Jacob wool, the Jacob sheep. So you can see it's got the different colors going through it. Lovely. Oh, and as I was saying, so I decided I was only going to do about 1 ounce of fiber each day. I may ply some of the different ones I spin together just to see how different fibers match up if they're plied with each other. I may just do small sample skeins. But when I was measuring it out yesterday, it became much easier for me if I just weighed out 40 grams. So except for the Angora and I think the Bison, everything that I'll be showing you is 40 grams. And that is an easy day spin for me. Fast, simple, and then we'll see what we do. But I'm looking forward to Jacob. I have spun Jacob before, but the last time I spun Jacob, there wasn't a lot of brown in it. So I'm really looking forward to see how that looks. It'll probably be its own skein of mini Jacob yarn. All right, let's see who else. Oh, one of the bags of CVM, California Variegated Mutant. For those of you who aren't familiar with CVM, it is a breed that was developed, I believe, back in the 60s. And the sheep don't come out black or white or brown. They have variation here. Bring it up close to the camera. They have variation. They can be basically spotted, but not spotted like the Jacob sheep. More like mottled, patches, and blending. And this one is a wonderful taupey gray. I have a number of taupey grays. This is from a sheep called Ying. And I love the CVM. It spins so very, very fine, but it can fluff up beautifully when it is, when the twist is set, when it is washed. All right, that one's going to make some crinkling noises because I have to shove it back in this little bag. So that's Ying. Let's just go right on to another CVM. So this CVM is Benji, and Benji is another light gray, taupey colored, mottled sheep. It can very similar in tones, but Benji, at least this part of Benji's fiber, it's short and it's crimpy. Some of the CVM gets quite long. Some of it can be short. Oh, here's a perfect little lock. So, unlike Ying, Benji's fiber is much more delicate, much more fine. I'll be able to spin it much more finely. Let me see if I can pull. So, there is Ying. There is Benji. They look about the same, but Benji is just a bit more fine, and Benji is a little bit brown. So sometimes they may look exactly the same, but there is a slight difference. I don't know if it will show up in the camera. I'll take close-up pictures. We'll just see. But there is a very subtle difference. Benji has a bit more of a brown mottling, whereas Ying is more of a gray. Lovely, lovely difference. That's what I just love about the CVM. If you get a chance to spin it, it's just delightful. As I said, it fluffs up quite a bit in my experience when the twist is set. So it makes for a very good woolen yarn. It has lots of air. It's very light, very fluffy. It can be spun to where it's more worsted, but I tend to love the softness of it. So this is another CVM, and this one is nickel. Not nickel like the money, nickel as in like black. Nicole, maybe. But I see it and I say it looks like nickel. It makes me think of Nicholas. It makes me think of, not Saint Nick, but I know that there is mythology, something about somebody with that type of name, and it refers to something dark and black. Kind of like the crows that have been crowing behind me. It's actually a very dark brown. I'm sure it doesn't show up on the camera well. I'll try to get some good pictures to show you better color. I have spun a bunch of this. If you watch my video where I show the sweater I made for my son, the pictures that I had were, of course, of my husband wearing it. If you see that project in my Ravelry page, it's the Boskage sweater. Nickel is the fleece that I used to blend with. So CVM comes in lots of colors. I used to have one that was as a much more true black. I loved that one. That was just gorgeous. The fleece had areas that were almost true black and almost and sheep. Anyone who doesn't know sheep know that sheep doesn't. The black for sheep tends to be just a really dark brown. It's not like the alpaca that gets very black. It's not like the I know alpaca has really black. I know there's another one that has a true black fiber. It's more of a really dark brown. But in this one sheep that I had years ago, it had patches that were really dark chocolate, almost black, and then patches that were white, taupey color. And oh, it was beautiful. I over-dyed a bunch of it, and the colors that I got from it, the greens, the reds, oh, gorgeous. I have not found another CVM like that, but I do have. I'm not spinning any of it this time. I do have some prize Corriedale Lincoln blend, cross of sheep, and I do. Hold on just a second. Let the plane go by. Okay, that's a little better. I can hear myself speak now. I'm sure I'll have cut out most of that airplane going by. So as I was saying, I have this Corriedale Lincoln cross fleece that I'm saving. It takes up 3 of my buckets. And it is a black and white combo. And it has really nice long staple. And I'm saving that for a very specific project. I bought it technically for my daughter, but it's more likely going to get spun by me before it's done. Alright, so let's go back to the basket. Let's go with another CVM while we're at it. This one is a beautiful, beautiful gray. I'm not even going to take it all the way out of its bag. You can see just another beautiful fleece. Wonderful gray. So they do come in... They come in many varieties. I find it doesn't handle quite doesn't get quite as fluffy and squishy dense as the Corriedale. And I know that I've looked into Corriedale. The U.S. Corriedale, I guess, is bred to be softer than some of the other Corriedales you get. So we're still all talking very fine wool here. So it doesn't puff up and get as dense as the Corriedale. I couldn't believe the difference between working with the Corriedale and the CVM a few years ago when I did a bunch of sweaters. Totally different way it feels. The CVM ends up still being much lighter texture. But it also doesn't handle the same way Merino does. Or the Deboulet or the Rambouillet breeds. It is really quite a unique breed. You can get Rommeldale. Rommeldale is the parent breed for the CVM. It was that breed that was created here, I think, in the United States. I hope I'm not wrong. I have not looked it up in my book more recently, but it was a breed of sheep that was bred to combine a bit of, I think, 2 different two different characteristics of sheep. And all of a sudden, it started having a mutation that kept throwing these strange colors. And the breeders were like, well, actually, this is kind of cool. Let's run with this. So, if you can't find CVM, see if you can find Wensleydale, and try that, because it's going to be pretty much the same properties. So, moving on, I think this is the last of my CVM. This was one that I had forgotten I had. I know, it's terrible when your fleece stash is so big you forgot. But, this one, I forgot that I had this. The sheep's name is Mosaic, and oh my goodness, look at that. Look at that color variation. That one's going to be probably just a mini skein, not blended with anything else. The other CVMs will probably end up being in like a 4-ply. But that's going to be its own mini skein, because that is a wonderful color combination that I can't wait to see spun up and plied. Okay, so moving on. Ah, yes, one of my other favorite breeds, the Wensleydale. And if you're British and I'm pronouncing that wrong, I apologize. I've been watching tons and tons of British programming just so that I can try to figure it out how to more properly pronounce the name of the sheep that we spin. But Wensleydale, I have a few of those as well. It is a wonderful curly locked breed, and I have a few of them. I fell in love with some Wensleydale quite a number now. Oh, it's probably been 5 years ago or more. Maybe a little bit longer. And let me see if, when I had the opportunity to buy some, I had no idea what I would do with it. I had no idea how to spin it. But it sat there in its lanolin looking like liquid silver. And I was so captivated. Now, it doesn't have quite that sheen when the lanolin's washed out. But how do you pass up a fleece that looks like liquid silver? And there is some of the locks. It is just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful color, beautiful texture. It's a it is a coarser but lustrous, wonderful. And if you're wanting to do core spinning, or where you're making, and if you want to make art yarns, Wensleydale is well worth the price. I'm not sure how much I paid for it my first year, but I know that the last year that I was buying fleece from that market, the price had skyrocketed for Wensleydale. But it is worth it, especially if you're doing anything like doll hair and things like that. I have Angel on the top of my tree, and her hair, on top of my Christmas tree, I should clarify. And I've made the hair out of that silver Wensleydale. So, the next one, I know I have some other Wensleydale, we'll get into it. But this is a fiber that I became enamored with here in Virginia when I was visiting Colonial Williamsburg a number of years ago. And then I was able to find a breeder while I was in Colorado that I was able to get some. This is from a sheep called Anna. I think in one of my previous videos I did show some of this. Look at that lock. This is Leicester Longwool, and it is a heritage breed, because this is what one of the breeds of sheep they had in Colonial Williamsburg back in the 1700s, and it is just fabulous. And I believe Anna was a lamb, so this is finer than the other Leicester Longwool I have. It's lovely, absolutely lovely to spin. Excuse me while I try to clear my throat. There's a few allergies. Oh, we have another airplane. Let's pause for a moment. Okay, we're back after that airplane went by. So, Anna, as I said, is just a really fine, smooth, shiny texture. I have spun a lot more of one of her relatives, and it was a ram. It's much more coarse, and it is the best fiber for making rugs and bags and amuguramis out of. I have made some fun little critters out of the Leicester long wool. It keeps its shine. Oh, it dyes up beautifully. So, wouldn't put it necessarily next to my skin, but for outerwear, for craft projects, for anything that you want a good shine, Leicester long wool, that is just a fabulous fiber. This is some more of the Wensleydale. Put it over here. This is some white. You see its lock. Again, you can see this one's a little dirtier than the others. I'll have to open it up, tease it up, get a little bit of dirt on my spinning apron. But I do look forward to the combinations of fibers that I will be putting together. This one. This is some of the alpaca, and I believe, oh please, I'll post if I am wrong, but I believe this is Surrey alpaca versus Hakuna, because this is it had longer and it seemed like longer and curlier locks, but I could be completely wrong. I haven't gone and looked back at my purchase list, but either way, I know that this looked different and felt different, and it washed up different. But sometimes when you buy it, they just tell you it's alpaca, and you're not really sure what type of alpaca you're buying. But either way, it might actually be Hakuna. Now that I open it up, it might actually be not the long curly haired. But it's very, very fine. It's lovely soft. I have to wash all of my fiber because we discovered that it can be cause lots of allergens, especially when you spin inside. This is another one of them. I might have to tease open a little bit more to spin it. But yeah, when it's washed, it doesn't look very inviting. It doesn't look as pretty as it did before it was washed. But even after it's washed, it's still full of stuff that would cause, well, everything here in front of me is getting covered in vegetable matter and dust and everything. And when I wasn't washing my fiber before I spun it, we discovered that it put lots of tiny particles in the air, and that my husband struggled to breathe. He has since had many allergy shots to try to build him up to where he's not as sensitive, but it taught me a very important lesson. Unwashed fiber is putting stuff in the air. It's making it harder for your body, and we want to try to mitigate that just a little bit, especially if there's a chance that there's people with allergens around. So, especially when you're spinning inside, but whenever you're around other people, if you're doing demonstrations, keep that in mind. Unwashed fibers can put a lot of allergens into the air. And in our case, Angora rabbit fiber really nearly did my poor husband in before we figured this out. Just a good soak, just a good, cleaning of it, and it all of a sudden becomes much more easily spun indoors. So, this is another bag of the Wensleydale, and this one was really interesting. So, this one, it is a silver. There's some silver. I think, oh yes, this one is a lamb. So, it's got the tips that are discolored a little. But it's silver, and it is dark as well. So, that one's going to be really fun to spin up. And I don't mind about the dark tips. adds a little depth. If they're strong, if they're not, breakable, I just leave them on. If they're a little weak, then I'll pop them off just before I spin them. But those all felt pretty strong. Now some more alpaca. This alpaca has an interesting story. This is Max, and we were at the Estes Park wool market a number of years ago, and we had walked out to the parking lot to place some of my purchases in the car so that we could go and I could purchase some more fleece. And as we were walking back into the market, so we're still in the parking lot, there's a woman coming towards us, and she's carrying a big garbage bag, and she looked at me and she says, "Are you a spinner?" And I said, "I am." She said, "Here, take this. My husband will kill me if I come home with another." She was a breeder, and she had been trying to sell some, I think, is what's behind this. But yes, so every time I see Max, I chuckle, because Max was the free, really nice alpaca that somebody in the parking lot gave me. So, this is some alpaca. This one, I forgot I had this one. If I had remembered that I had this one, I would have probably spun it up recently when I was doing one of my projects last year, because, oh my goodness, I forgot that I had this alpaca. I have a bunch of alpaca that I was able to buy really low. It's a bunch of alpaca seconds, and I've used them in different projects because they were really long sections. They weren't really too short most of the time, and so. But I don't spin a lot of alpaca. I have a bunch of other stuff. So I carry all that around, and so I sometimes forget what's in some of the buckets labeled alpaca until I open them up, even though I've labeled them. And this one is a glorious fleece, and now that I remember I have it, it's called, the name of the alpaca was Rosemary, and oh my goodness, it is a gorgeous fleece. Why have I not remembered this until now? I will be doing some alpaca or blending it with some of my CVM and just loving that. So I'm getting closer to the bottom. This is the first of my Angora. This is from Fiona. And Fiona was one of our bunnies. All the Angora that I will be showing you is from bunnies that we used to have. And there is Fiona. Fiona was the most amazing German Angora. Oh my goodness. She produced almost double what the other rabbits produced at any given time. She was just absolutely a fiber producer. She wasn't the most love your attention type rabbit. We had some that would just, just absolutely were love hounds. But Fiona was a little more offstandish, but oh my goodness, she was a sweet rabbit. She produced tons and tons and tons and tons of fleece. We were constantly needing to pluck her to keep it from getting overblown and matted. She was just an amazing rabbit. Now this is from Freddie. His most of the rabbits that we had were of German giant pedigree. Freddie was our French, and he was a black and white, and he was a sweetheart, and he produced some lovely fine fiber. So I have some Freddie, and these are only 20 grams, and 20 grams of Angora is more than enough of a spin. It produces quite a bit of fine Angora fluff for my purposes. Whoops, sorry about that. If my microphone's picking it up, I'm making tons of noise with bags and bumping things. This is another one of my Angoras. This is Ollivander. Oh my goodness, he was a funny little rabbit. And there is Ollivander. Some more lovely gray. The wonderful thing about Angora, it dyes a little differently than other fibers. It can get intense color, but it can also stay very muted. Because it's so light, the thing that happens with Angora is that it can look really intensely colored in the dye pot, but then as soon as you blend it with something, or even just spin it on its own, it becomes airy. Because it's all fluff. It's going to bloom. It's going to have lots of bloom. And so it's a lovely fiber to dye and then add into something. I have some sweaters, and I'll see if I maybe put a picture here. The only color added to the sweater came from the Angora. The sheep's wool that I used, which was probably a Coriadel, if I'm remembering correctly, was undyed. I just dyed the Angora, and the bloom opened it up to where all it colored the sweater. So it is a very interesting fiber to dye. It's an interesting fiber to spin with, to blend. And in this little baby sweater, it's only about 20% at best Angora, maybe only 10%, but 10 to 20% of Angora, and it just really colored it. One of the things I was going to say is when washing Angora, it is going to look, when I say washing, it is a soaking process. You soak it, you spin out the excess water, you rinse it the same way by soaking it. You agitate as little as possible. You do everything possible, everything in your ability to not agitate this fiber. But when it comes out and it's dry, it looks like, oh, I felted it, it's all matted, it's all... No, it's not. It opens back up. You can use a little flicker brush, a very fine-toothed carder. Dog slicker brushes work. That's actually what we used to groom the rabbits. But look how that little bit that looked like it was felted has opened up into a fluffy cloud. And this bowl that I have here, that's why I have this bowl. This is my spinning Angora bowl. I always spin my Angora from a cloud. Even if I've had to fluff it open, I fluff it open and I'll spin it from a bowl. Because if I don't keep it in a bowl, and wood is wonderful because it doesn't have the static, it attaches itself to me and it ends up all over everywhere. So I have this nice little wooden bowl that my husband made me, and it is my spinning Angora bowl. But that is Ollivander. We are getting close to the end here. Who do we have next? Mohair. And again, going back to that sweater I made for my son last summer. This is the black mohair that I blended with the CVM and some alpaca, black alpaca, to create that. Now, I don't know if it shows up on the camera, but this mohair is full of dander. And most of it falls out when I spin, but from what I can tell, dander doesn't seem to affect the end product. My son loves his sweater. You don't see any dander. It falls out. So, it may have had dander, which meant I ended up paying a little bit less for it, but it is so soft, so shiny. It is so smooth. And my son, who can handle a little bit more itchiness towards the skin, he wears that sweater all the time. He loves it. It has become his go-to. It is his comfort. It is his security blanket now at home. He comes home from work, he puts that on. He loves it. So, lovely mohair. And one more in the basket, and then there's one on the table. So this is the last of the Angora. And most when we bred our Angora, our wonderful, wonderful female was actually a satin Angora. And she was bred to a she had a couple breedings, but she was bred to a male that was a German, and he was of a darker color. But she was this wonderful, I always get the colors messed up depending on the breeds. I call it creamsicle. I think it's fawn, but she produced babies with all varying types of pretty much creamsicle. She did throw a couple whites. We do have a couple whites, but I treasure my white fiber, and I don't spin it for, except for when I really know I need the white. Oh, and as I was talking about with dyeing, you can over dye colored fleece. It takes the color. You just get a different intensity, a different feel to it than you would if you were dyeing white. But, oh my goodness, this comes from Ginger. And you can see why we named it Ginger. It was such a beautiful color. So there's all of that. And the last one, last but not least, in fact, special. This one is, I'll pull it out. This is the undercoat, the winter-most next to the skin undercoat of Bison. Yes, buffalo. The American buffalo, a bison. And it's really relatively clean. I have been informed that the bison, the American buffalo, the bison, has 7 coats of fiber. And during the winter at least, and they will shed. Well, this bison, I haven't had to go through and take many of the guard hairs out, because after some of the big shaggy outer hairs had come off, the owner of this bison, who happened to be the owner's pet, would go out and groom the bison all through the spring as the coat was coming off. And because he was grooming it, he had, some of it has guard hair, so I have a bunch of guard hair that would come off. And I have this undercoat that is almost completely dehaired, because instead of it having to separate the shed material from, the layers of the shed material, instead, this was brushed off and collected with a curry comb. And how I ended up getting this fiber is I went into our local animal feed store, and I was buying rabbit feed and chicken feed for the animals that we had. And they had learned that I spun. The topic came up because everyone always asks what I do with the Angora rabbits. And they're like, oh, wow, we've got this guy that works here, and he has this buffalo, and he has all this fiber. Would you be interested in spinning some up? And I'm thinking that it's a bowl like this. So I'm like, sure. And actually, I think the initial discussion happened between my husband and the people at the store. And so when I showed up, it fills 2.5 of my buckets. I have 1 bucket of the longer guard hairs, the more outer coat. I don't have any of the outer coat, but I have 1 bucket of the more outer coat, and I have 1.5 buckets of this that's almost been completely dehaired. And they're like, yeah, here, you can have it. He just was wondering what it would look like if you could just, show him some. So I spun up some, and then I actually crocheted him a little buffalo. Not that I am very good at crocheting a buffalo. And then I gave him a sample skein, small sample skein, and the buffalo, so he could see what his buffalo spun up like. It was delightful. I have spun cat hair for people who have had pets, but I have to say this is the most unique pet I have spun up for people. It's the American buffalo. It is the bison. And so that is my 21 fibers that I am going to be spinning over the next 23 days of Tour de Fleece. I will probably have videos every few days. Unlike last year, I don't think I'll be trying to do a video every day. As I said, I have other projects I'm working on. I have a quilt that I'm supposed to be hand quilting. Actually, I have a couple. I have a quilt that I'm trying to put together. So I have a number of other projects going on this year. But I am sure to come back with some more fiber fun as the tour progresses. Well, I hope you have enjoyed me showing you my fiber and talking a little bit about where it comes from and stories. And if you are any of the people in Colorado that recognize the name of the sheep or recognize the story of the buffalo, I send a shout out to you. There are things that I really do miss about living in Colorado, and one of them is the Estes Park Wool Market, and the other are all the fiber friends that I made over the years. I don't know where I'd be without the ones who said, here, you've got to try spinning this CVM cross. The first CVM that I did, I think, was a CVM crossed with, Cotswold. I think that's what it was. It was a CVM crossed with a Cotswold. And it was wonderful. It had long locks, but it was still nice and soft. And I only have a very, very small, like 8 ounces left of any of those first sheep. I don't know what I would do if I hadn't had somebody say, hey, give this a try. You really need to try this fleece. So a shout out to all of you who helped start me on my journey. And a shout out to all of you who are starting your journey. I have had an opportunity to interact with so many new spinners, and especially in these last few weeks as we get ready for Tour de Fleece. Kudos to all of you for diving right in and joining in on the fun. And happy spinning. Enjoy this wonderful time. And I hope to be back again soon with another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric. We will see you soon. Happy spinning. And I'm going to get back to the wheel. I'll probably end this video with just a little shot of me picking one of my fibers, spinning off into the sunset. Except it's only like noon. So enjoy, and we will see you later. Bye-bye. I've decided to start with some Angora. I may not get this specific batch all spun up today, but I'm going to start. I have this wheel. I'll designate it for my Angora spin. I chose Ollivander, and I'm just going to sit here and spin, and I'll see you again soon.